Hi everyone, and thanks for joining me today. This week we're talking about the dangers of overspending and what you can do to avoid it. My name is Angela. For those of you that don't know me, I started the Money Messenger project as a way of imparting some of my knowledge with regards to money. I've been working in financial planning for the last 20 years and I'm also an investor myself. I started with nothing and I went on to accrue a multi-property portfolio, all starting from scratch and all starting with just a meager income. So the Money Messenger project is a way of sharing some of that knowledge with you. Everything I have learned over the last 20 years, everything I teach you, tell you about, tell you to stay away from, I also do myself. So I walk the walk as well as talk the talk. So today we're talking about the dangers of overspending and what you can do to avoid it. So let's get started. Let's talk about spending for a moment. In financial planning, I am seeing a lot of people with growing credit card debt, growing personal loan, growing interest in pay now, buy now, pay later schemes such as Afterpay, Easy Pay, things like that. It's all pointing towards the fact that people are spending a lot, more than we used to. In Australia, America, the UK, we have very similar habits and spending habits. We're seeing more and more people spending money, more and more people using personal debt incorrectly, and that debt is sending people broke. So what can you do about it? There are things you can do in your day-to-day life to use the money you earn now, but in a better way to get more out of life. Now, to be able to do that, you need to have surplus income, even if it's just a little bit. You don't need to cut back so you remove all enjoyment out of life, but you do need to become conscious with money. Wealthy people don't spend more than they make. Wealthy people don't use personal debt. So which do you want to be? Wealthier or poorer? Bad debt, which is credit card, personal loans, car loans, will send you broke. It will send you financially backwards. And even if you earn good money now, even if you are on top of your repayments, even if you are not going broke and you're fine at managing your debts, paying money for interest for personal loans, credit cards, things like that is not good financial planning. It doesn't make sense. That interest is not tax deductible. That interest is useless. There's no reason to use personal debt to be able to have the things you want in life. And I'm talking from experience now. So let's look at the point of instant gratification. It's a terminology, a term that's thrown around a lot these days, and it basically means we as people have a hard time in delaying getting what we want. We don't like to wait anymore. We want everything now. And that comes from a time where everything is instant these days. With the invention of the internet, you can have anything you want delivered to your door quite quickly. With tap and go ATM cards, credit cards, we don't even need to get our wallets out anymore. You can just flick over your iPhone and pay with your phone. Tap your card and go. It's instant. Everything is quick. PayPal, pay online, it's there ready to go, and it's there to entice you to shop. So when it comes to managing your money well, you need to be conscious with your money. You need to think about money. Every time you spend $1, you need to think about it. So instant gratification is the feeling we get when we buy something straight away and we get it straight away. It may not even be the good feeling you get when that product arrives as so much the rush of when you first make that purchase, whether you realize it or not. Instant gratification can also be buying things we don't want or that we don't really need in order to make ourselves feel better or impress other people around us. So think about that for a moment. How often do you buy things without actually thinking of it? How often do you buy things out of impulse, whether you're standing in the store or these days something pops up on the internet, on a Facebook ad, on an email in your inbox? Instant gratification is the feeling of wanting it now for joy, rather than saving for something you want and buying it in a few days, a few weeks, a few months, a few years. A lot of people are finding ways of getting things that they want now, whether it's paying for a wedding that you can't otherwise afford unless you use debt so you can get married now instead of in a couple of years' time, whether it's buying clothes at the store using Afterpay or Easy Pay, which may or may not have interest attached to it, but it's still a form of getting what you want now and paying for it later. Whether it's buying a car that is better than a basic car, it's the car you want with a car loan, but not necessarily just a car that would get you from A to B. Whether it's buying a new phone rather than just using your old phone. Maybe there's nothing wrong with your phone, yet when that 2-year cycle comes up and your phone plan might be over here in Australia, we go and get another phone. We sign up for another mobile phone contract for another 2 years. They're all forms of instant gratification. Takeaway coffees, takeaway food. Instead of making it ourselves at home, where it's very easy to order Uber Eats and just get it delivered to your door. They're all forms of instant gratification. And quite often, we're seeing people's expenses increase a lot over the times. Now, I know Australia is an expensive country. I've lived overseas before and I can tell you Australia is a very expensive country to live in. But we also earn fairly good salaries here for the cost of living compared to some other countries. So things cost a lot in Australia, but we are also seeing more and more double income households, as in both people in the household may work, whether one person works full-time, the other maybe works part-time, or with younger couples especially, even before they have kids, we're seeing 2 full-time incomes in households. So we should be seeing the growth of ordinary Australians growing in terms of their wealth, but we're not. We're seeing rising personal debt levels, which is a sign of the times that even though there's more money coming into a household, there are more expenses, and they're not always essential expenses. Let's talk about that more. The difference between an essential expense and a non-essential expense. Essential expenses are those which you must pay, or else you will starve, be homeless, or go to jail. Basically, that's your essential expenses. Your food, your shelter, whether it's rent or a mortgage repayment, they are essential. Clothing, but not buying new clothing very often all the time. Clothing to put a shirt on your back. Basics. Non-essential expenses are everything else. It's your takeaway, it's your eating out, your drinking out, your holidays, your buying of new gadgets when your existing gadgets aren't necessarily old, there's nothing wrong with them. It's buying the nicer quality items in the store rather than the cheaper. It's buying things you don't necessarily need for the house, for example, or you girls out there that like to decorate the house, I get it. But we don't quite often need those expenses that we're buying for the house. There's a group that I follow on Facebook called Kmart Mums Australia. My friend got me involved in it, and I love seeing how those women are putting hacks together of using Kmart items and bits and pieces to decorate their house in a cost-effective way, or to replace things in their house and decorate it in a cost-effective way. But let's be honest, ladies, and I'm talking to the ladies because most of those people in the group are ladies, you don't need a lot of that stuff that you're putting into your homes. I am seeing these days that there are a lot of people that are confusing what an essential expense is and a non-essential expense is. As our taste buds grow and our desire for nice things in life grow, some people are forgetting the basics of what actually it means to be a need versus a want, whether you actually need something or you just desire something. If you cut back your expenses and really assess every dollar, you'll see there is a difference between what you must pay and what you want to pay. But as lifestyle grows and we get accustomed to living a certain way, sometimes those lines can be blurred. And you don't need to be a higher income earner or come from an affluent family to have a nice lifestyle. Even people that are earning a modest salary in the household grow accustomed to spending all of that salary. So whatever lifestyle they live, you get accustomed to it and it gets nicer. And we forget that perhaps as we were growing up, we all didn't have air conditioning in our cars or in our homes, or perhaps we didn't get to go to nicer schools or have new uniforms. We used to, buy secondhand uniforms, or you didn't necessarily buy the expensive food when you went grocery store shopping, or you didn't go to a more expensive store. A lot of parents, they would be frugal in their spending because there wasn't as much money around. I'm talking about times like when we were younger and perhaps a lot of mums stayed at home. There were single income households. you'll find that older generations were a lot more frugal with their money than we are today. And this is not a judgment on where you choose to spend your money, but the fact that we're seeing more and more household debt growing, that is a worry. That is a cause for concern and why we need to cut back a little bit. So when it comes to household debts, whether it be credit card debt, car loans, personal loans, it's growing. That means we're spending too much. You need to cut back. The dangers of overspending are if you spend more than you earn, you will go bankrupt eventually. It will happen. You can't spend money that's not yours. You can only spend money that you can afford to repay back. So if you're overspending now, spending more than you make, you know that you are simply because you either have no money in the bank for yourself at the end of the week or you have growing personal debt. Those are signs that you're overspending. When you overspend, you leave yourself little to no money to be able to invest for your long term. Now that may mean repaying your home loan faster than the standard 25, 35 years it takes, which will reduce your interest costs and mean you pay less to the bank for your home. Because over the term of a home loan, you can generally pay for the house twice over by the time you've paid for a 30-year mortgage. So it's really important that you repay it faster. Or investing could be into things like managed funds, shares, property, things that will grow your wealth over the long term and secure you and your family's financial future. Now, not everybody wants to be a property mogul or a billionaire. I'm sure we'd all love to be, but not everyone wants to do what it takes to become that financially secure. But everybody needs to do some kind of investing. I've done videos in the past about starting investments from a small amount and the importance of that, because there's a thing called inflation, which is the rising costs of living over time, essentially. Say a loaf of bread doesn't cost as much as it does today, didn't cost that much a few years ago. Likewise, a cost of a loaf of bread in 5 years will be higher than it is today. That's inflation. So if you only keep money in the bank or a term deposit, for example, something that earns only bank interest, those interest rates will be low, 1%, 1.5%, maybe 2% if you're lucky. That is less than the cost of inflation, which is usually around 2.5% per year. So by keeping money in the bank only, you go backwards financially. Everybody needs to invest even a small amount in something that will outperform the cost of inflation, something like shares or property, and whether the shares be in managed funds or whether they be direct, doesn't matter, but something that will invest in growth assets, which are shares and property essentially, that will grow over time, over the long term, and outperform the cost of inflation. Otherwise, you will go backwards by just having money saved to a bank account. So when you overspend, you leave yourself little to no money to invest. You go backwards financially. If you live payday to payday and never get ahead financially by investing, you will only ever live payday to payday. You will only ever be able to afford as much as you can in 1 week or with your regular run-of-the-mill savings. Investing is when you get your money working for you rather than you working for your money. So let's look at that further. Why it's so important to cut back on your spending and to have some extra cash flow to be able to invest. Now, if you were to save, there's a lot of articles these days that talk about the cost of takeaway coffee, and if you just cut that out from your daily budget. Now, I personally don't buy coffee every day. I have a coffee machine though, so it's irrelevant to me. Change the terminology, change the item, whether you buy lunch out at work every day or whether you go to Kmart regularly to buy knickknacks and household decorative items, whether you buy video games, whether you buy clothes regularly, whether you order Uber Eats quite often because you can't be bothered cooking. Let's be honest, we all get there sometimes, but whether you do it regularly or not, that's the difference. So whatever it may be, if you can cut back your expenses by just $5 a day, which represents a coffee, a takeaway coffee, which represents some food, cutting back on your grocery bill slightly, spending a little less on your mobile phone bill or your internet or whatever it may be, a little bit less on your heating bill or your gas bill, wherever you can find $5 a day to cut back would give you an equivalent of $150 a month extra. Doesn't sound like much, but it can be enough to start an investment portfolio, a savings plan that you add $150 a month to. $150 a month sounds a lot more than $5 a day, but it's the same thing. And if you invest $150 a month into a long-term investment and say you earn 6% a year, that money over 10 years would accrue to $25,000. That's not bad. It's only $5 a day. If you leave that investment for longer and you earn compound interest, so your investment returns are getting reinvested, that money would grow to about $70,000 after 20 years. Now, the 10 years you could accrue $25,000. Over 20 years, it could accrue to $70,000. That's a lot more over 20 years than just simply doubling your 10-year portfolio. That's because compounding interest compounds on each other. Returns get invested and starts growing on growing. You make money on top of money. That's the power of compound interest. So if you can cut back just $5 a day, which equates to $150 a month, and invest that at a measly 6% per year, which is very achievable, you could find yourself with $70,000 after 20 years just by cutting back $5 a day, which isn't much for most people and is easily absorbed in your day-to-day expenses. But what if you could double that? What if you could cut back just $10 a day from your expenses? What if you invested that? That's the equivalent of $300 a month. I regularly hear people saying, I don't have money for investing. I can't possibly afford to invest. But you need to afford to invest. You need to find that money. Everybody can afford to invest something, whether it's $1 a day, $5 a day, $10 a day, as long as you choose to redirect that money from your current expenses. So if you can cut back just $10 a day, that equates to $300 a month. If you invested that at 6%, after 10 years, you'd have over $50,000. What if you invested that and left it for 20 years? You'd have over $138,000. Again, that's more than double the 10-year returns that you would achieve, because the longer you leave an investment, the better it grows. So where can you find $10 a day in your budget? What can you cut back on? Let's look at the steps to take to help you get a handle on your spending and to know where your spending is going so that you don't overspend. You want to be in control of your money so that you can live the life that you want. Number one, understand your spending triggers. Assess when you spend money, why you spend money, whether it be online at home or at the store. See what triggers you. Is it out of need that you need to go and get some groceries? Is it out of boredom? Is it out of anger or stress or frustration? Is it out of habit? Do you find yourself looking at those email newsletters that come to your inbox of all your favorite clothing stores? The temptation that pops up in front of you. Check your triggers and get them in check. See what triggers you and how you can avoid those triggers. Even if it's just unsubscribing from those emails that come to your inbox. Nobody needs temptation in this life. Number two, track your spending. If you don't track your spending, which literally means getting a piece of paper and a pen or an app and tracking every single dollar you spend over a day, but preferably a month or two, you can't possibly know where you're spending your money. Because little things pop into our expenses on a day-to-day budget, whether it's a coffee, a piece of gum, or an extra bill, or a speeding fine, or something, but they creep into your life. And quite often you may assume you spend a certain amount, but when in reality, it's actually a lot different. So I implore you to track your expenses at least for a month, preferably two. To do that, paper or pen, or try an app. There's heaps of them out there. I personally love an app called Monify. I use that regularly myself as well, and I think it's great. You can make up your own categories that you want to put your expenses in, and it just takes a couple of buttons to press and you pop your expenses in as you go. Or if need be, do it when you get home overnight. Just sit there and check what expenses you made and pop them in your app. You will be surprised, I guarantee, over the course of a month as to how much money you're spending and where. Once you've tracked your expenses, you can then put in place a proper budget. You don't have to be so strict that for the rest of your life you track every single dollar, but you do need to check where your money is going essentially so that you can put in place a budget. And a budget will help you know if you are overspending in a certain category of life or if you're underspending. Number 4, cash. Cash is king. No more credit cards. If you rely on credit cards and you are overspending, you are finding you're not having a lot of money left over the day, at the end of the day, week, month, maybe you've got growing credit card debt, then go back to basics. Get rid of the credit cards. Credit cards haven't been around for years and years and years and since the dawn of time. They're only a relatively new thing in the last few handfuls of years. I don't remember my parents using credit cards ever, and I only ever got a credit card for the first time after I turned 18. They haven't been around forever. They are not normal to use. They are a more recent invention, and let's be honest, they're there to entice you to spend because banks make money from the interest you pay. So go back to basics. Cut up the cards. Leave them at home when you go to the store if you need to. Go back to cash. Cash is king. There's nothing wrong with just using cash. I'm not opposed to using credit cards. I actually use a credit card myself for all of my expenses, but I have no credit card debt and I always repay the full amount by the due date. That's the difference. If you have credit card debt now or you're overspending, then it's best to get rid of the credit card and just stick to cash. Number 5, set short-term goals. If there's something you want to save for, if there's something you want to achieve, whether it's repaying some small amounts of debts or whether it's saving for a particular item, then start small and set some short-term goals for yourself that you can achieve. Because when you achieve them, you'll motivate yourself to keep going. Number 6, give every dollar a job. What that means is be conscious of your money. Try and have a zero spend mentality, which means on a day-to-day basis, you spend nothing. And then as a bill pops up, as a rent pops up, as a grocery run pops up, whenever you're about to get out your credit card, your cash, your wallet, think about where that dollar is going. Check each dollar. Anytime someone's asking for money or you're forced to pay for something, assess it. Think about it. Is it needed? Do you want to? Start from zero and work your way up. That's what I call a zero spend mentality. And by giving every dollar a job, it means you're allocating dollars with intention. For me, I'm a big fan of using separate bank accounts for separate savings goals. I use a bills account for all of my bills where I put in a monthly amount to cover my bills, my essentials, my things that I have to pay. And by moving that money away from eyesight the day after I'm paid into different bank accounts, it allocates each dollar for a goal, for a purpose, for an expense. That leaves less money in my everyday bank account for me to spend, for me to look at and think I've got cash to blow. If you get rid of the money that you have to, and that's not just on expenses, that's also your savings, get your savings out of eyesight and into other accounts quickly as soon as you're paid, then the less money in your everyday bank account, the less money for you to spend. Every dollar has a job. Every dollar is allocated somewhere else, so you have less to spend afterwards. So those are the 6 steps that I would try to get a handle on your spending. Because if you're overspending, you're going to go around in circles. You got to get a handle on your spending. You got to cut back. I do think there is a time coming where people are really going to start cutting back in their expenses and getting back to basics, because we seem to have gone full circle from being frugal in our childhoods because of the way our parents were raised to now children and young adults getting more and more luxuries in life, which is growing them accustomed to having the good things in life and which is quite frankly setting a bad example. I do think that there is going to come full circle with spending less because of that rising household debt, things that we didn't see a few years ago. Putting pressure on your budget, spending too much money, having debts out of control, it's all extra stress and nobody needs that. So if you get a handle on your spending, you will then cut back on your need for debt, cut back on your expenses, give yourself more room to breathe and have a buffer. and then create surplus income, which you can then use to either repay debts faster or invest, because you need to invest. Just remember that. So today we talked about getting control of your spending. I hope you enjoyed that video. Please leave me a comment on the Facebook Money Messenger site if you put these in place for you and what results you get from them. I do these videos each week, so please subscribe for more. I hope you found good value in them. I'll see you next week. In the meantime, please subscribe to this channel and to the Money Messenger website, which is www.moneymessenger.com.au. I will see you all next week. This is Angela signing off. Bye for now. See ya.